The Diocese of Raleigh, North Carolina. The story of the faith began here with the labors of a missionary and a prominent Catholic layman. It came of age during the Civil Rights era under a prophetic bishop, and is still being written today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop Luis Rafael Zarama.
I cannot preach if I don't have my relationship with the Lord. I cannot sanctify the people if I not let the Lord first to come to me and help me to be better. I cannot govern the church without love, and the love is coming from my relationship with the Lord.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the Cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America.
A 150 miles west of Atlantic Beach and 300 miles east of the Great Smoky Mountains, among North Carolina's gently rolling hills, is the city of Raleigh, sea city of the Diocese of Raleigh.
How vibrant is the church here in the South? You don't give for granted your faith. Sometimes when you grow up in a place where everybody was the same, was Catholic and everything, and when you're moving here and you are not the majority, you are the minority, I think that pushes us a little bit way to be more careful about our faith and live more our faith.
As one historian said, the history of the church in North Carolina is 3 centuries of frustration and 3 decades of remarkable growth. The majority of North Carolina Catholics have always been newcomers, from the earliest days of the diocese to the present day.
The celebration of Mass in the early days of the colony was very rare, and there were only a handful of priests who would ride the circuit hundreds of miles trying to meet the Catholics in the area.
Catholicism in North Carolina has always been small in terms of demographics, but strong in terms of faith. John England was the first bishop of Charleston, which at its founding in 1820 comprised all of Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Bishop England was born in County Cork, Ireland, where he served as a priest. He was ordained Bishop of Charleston while still in Ireland, and arrived in Charleston in December of 1820, where he served until 1842.
England worked very closely with some of the very first Catholics in the Carolinas. North Carolina's most prominent early Catholic was William Gaston. Gaston, who served on the state legislature and then went on to the North Carolina Supreme Court, he wrote a decision limiting the control that slave owners could exercise over their slaves. He was a slave owner himself, so there's this tension that one has to think about in terms of being a devout Catholic, trying to do the right thing, but yet living in that culture where it was perfectly acceptable to have slaves.
The Catholic population grows slowly throughout the 19th century, largely due to immigration. Many Irish settle in the area, stonemasons and other skilled tradesmen, some coming to work in the mines. And then eventually, when the railroad starts to be built throughout the United States, these poor immigrant Catholic laborers were there to help establish that as well. In 1868, to meet the needs of the growing Catholic population, the Apostolic Vicariate of North Carolina was established under the authority of Bishop James Gibbons, who later becomes the Cardinal Archbishop of Baltimore. During the years of the Vicariate, one of the most influential developments in the church in North Carolina was due to the work of the Benedictine monks at Belmont Abbey, founded in 1876.
Belmont Abbey has significantly contributed to the Catholic faith in the area of Raleigh. It is a Benedictine abbey, and it eventually becomes not just a monastery, but a seminary as well.
By a unique quirk of church law, Belmont Abbey served as a territorial diocese. The first bishop of Raleigh covered the entire state with the exception of the 8 counties held by Belmont Abbey. Over time, the Abbey diocese was slowly reduced, and those territories were returned to the Diocese of Raleigh.
The Diocese of Raleigh was created on December 12, 1924, and as the young diocese progressed into the middle half of the 20th century, like many southern dioceses, it began to deal with the difficult history of race relations.
We can see that in the life of Father Thomas Haddon, who was the first Black priest ordained for the Diocese of North Carolina. He was a convert to Catholicism. He had encountered Catholicism through his religious education at a parochial school. He then felt this call to the priesthood to serve a population that was in desperate need of priests and personnel. But unfortunately, the first 3 religious orders that he approached turned him down because they refused to accept a Negro candidate.
After a short tenure as a seminarian with the Society of the Divine Word, Thomas Haddon was accepted to study for the Diocese of Raleigh.
His life is really a reminder of the remarkable perseverance that Black Catholics faced in finding acceptance in their church and living out their life as Catholics and living out the vocation to which they felt called. And it reminds us that Jim Crow segregation crossed into the pews of Catholic churches, and it was a fight for justice among the part of those who sought inclusion in the Catholic Church, breaking down those racial boundaries in order to find their acceptance as full members of the Church.
The 3rd Bishop of Raleigh, Vincent Waters, becomes bishop in 1945. World War II is ending, and America is starting to reckon with racial justice. Waters orders the desegregation of all Catholic churches and schools in North Carolina in 1953. He described segregation as a product of darkness and declared that the time had come to end it. He also said, "I am not unmindful as a Southerner of the force of this virus of prejudice. I know, however, there is a cure for this virus, and that is our faith."
The Catholic population boomed, not in the immediate post-World War II period that saw Catholic population grow in other regions of the American South, but really in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s.
The Diocese of Raleigh is really a product of America's Sunbelt development, as Catholics were lured into the region by jobs and opportunities, but also educational institutions and warmer weather. It has also become a place of welcome for new waves of immigrants seeking a better life for themselves and their families.
Now in Raleigh, we see new migration patterns really playing out and transforming the Catholic population that signals all of the richness of the Catholic Church in the 21st century.
It's a diocese that is growing. Half of our Catholic population in the diocese are Hispanic. People are coming from Africa, they are coming from India, and each one bring their own gifts and their own challenges that enrich the church and show us and let us see here in the diocese how universal is the church.
Until 2017, the beautiful but small Sacred Heart Church served as Raleigh's cathedral. Since 2017, the newly built majestic Cathedral of the Holy Name of Jesus has served as the diocese's spiritual home.
The first time that I came here I was in shock. I never expect to see this magnificent building from outside. I would say this has been like in Europe.
The Cathedral of the Holy Name of Jesus in Raleigh, North Carolina was designed with a cruciform layout, meaning that the entire church resembles a cross, the shape of a cross, and it is oriented towards the east. So the eastern apse, where the sanctuary is and the altar, points towards the east. And this type of eastern orientation is typical of Christian churches dating back to the very early days of legalized Christianity. So this is significant because Christ ascended into heaven in the east, and we're awaiting his second coming. So we look to the east in anticipation. The cathedral is surmounted by a large dome. It's 55 feet in diameter and 65 feet in height and weighs 162 tons. The theological significance of a dome hovering over the church is really the dome of the heavens, again, that comes to hover over this very sacred space wherein heaven and earth meet in the Eucharist. The square footage within the dome is approximately 3,000 square feet, and the exterior of the dome is covered with copper.
And the cathedral itself reflects something about how North Carolina Catholics now envision themselves, because it really is an effort for Catholics in the Diocese of Raleigh to make their mark on the religious landscape, building a cathedral that rivals the grand churches that were being built in cities across the United States during the late 19th and early 20th century. And the design itself is rather remarkable. It's an imposing Romanesque structure that really emphasizes the Roman character of the church as an architectural style that is distinctively Roman Catholic.
The statues within the cathedral are really reflective of the diocese itself. So we see the cultural diversity of the diocese represented by certain saints, Korean and Vietnamese martyrs, also St. Martin de Porres, who is of Spanish and African descent. We also see the saints who founded the major religious orders that are present and working within the Diocese of Raleigh.
I think one of the ways to see how the diocese is represented here is through the different statues that we have around the church who represent the different communities that we have.
The cornerstone of this cathedral was actually carried to St. Peter's Square in December of 2015 and blessed by Pope Francis. The cornerstone measures 10 by 13 inches, and it's made of a material called Santa Fiora, a stone that actually comes from the region of Tuscany, Italy. The 5 bells of the cathedral, located within the cathedral's tower, are actually named after the 5 bishops who have served the Diocese of Raleigh and their 5 mottos. So we have "Send forth thy Spirit," "All things to all men," "All through Mary," "To serve, not to be served," and "Walk humbly with God."
The church is a sense of belonging, and is the mother church of the diocese. The mother is the place in which the people can feel secure and feel that they belong to them. And this church belongs to the diocese.
The cathedra or chair inside the Cathedral of the Holy Name of Jesus represents Bishop Luis Zarama's role as the chief shepherd and apostle of Raleigh.
I was born in a town in Colombia, South America, southwest of the capital. The name of the town is Pasto, very high up in the mountains. My dad was from my hometown, and my mother, as she is, a daughter of a Swiss French and Swiss German. My dad was a teacher at one point in my hometown. He runs some of a family business that we have. We have some farms and some business there. And my mother was a homemaker. I have 4 brothers and 1 sister. I'm the oldest in the family. My childhood, I think, was a very normal childhood. I liked ride horses, and I did that for many, many, many years there in Colombia. And I was very mischievous sometimes, doing things that I didn't supposed to do, but I have great memories of growing up in Colombia. if my life was affected for the situation in Colombia, and the beginning was not, because it was very peaceful. The problem came in the early 80s when the problems with the drugs and the guerrilla start to be very obvious there. And that is one of the reasons why my parents left Colombia in 1983. But I stayed there until 1991 when I came here to the United States. My family was very close to a priest who came to our home and have meals with us, and especially was one of them who was very dear to us, was Padre Alvarez. I had a dream that said, maybe one day I could be like him. But I grew up, and the dream was not as strong, and I was looking to be a pilot, a cowboy, and different options there. But at the end, the call for the priest who was there. It was not easy to make the decision. To whom I told first my decision to become a priest was a cousin of my father. He is very dear to us, he's still alive, and he was the one who invited me one time to make the cursillo. And that was during that cursillo, at that time, when I said, okay, I need to do this.
Bishop Zarama completed his philosophy and theology studies in his hometown, then went on to study canon law at the Pontifical Xaverian University in Bogota. In 1989, he immigrated to the United States and continued his priestly studies in the Archdiocese of Atlanta.
I think that is still a mystery for me, because I never wanted to come to the state. My parents were already living in Orlando, in Florida, and my father, he mentioned a couple times, why you don't come here? And I didn't like that at all. But it was through the executive assistant of the dean of the canon law faculty in Bogota that she knew a priest who was from Atlanta. And they invited me to Atlanta to see the diocese and stay a couple of days there. After the interview, I liked the city, and that is why I came here to the state. And the beginning was tough. I didn't speak any English. In my flight from Bogota to Atlanta, I was trying to practice the little English that I knew to impress the pastor where I was supposed to stay. And I was practicing in the way that we spoke English there, you know. I was saying, good morning, Father, how are you doing? I was ready to quit in one point to go back to Colombia. I was running away from Atlanta, and I stopped to say goodbye to a priest, and he took away the keys from my car away from me, and he forced me to stay in that parish. And I was there for 3 days, and after that I said, okay, I will stay. But I think it's the most beautiful thing that happened with me during that time is the way to become who am I. Because it's not because of my father, because of my friends, because of what I had in Colombia, is what I became through this whole process.
Bishop Zarama was ordained to the priesthood in the Archdiocese of Atlanta on November 27, 1993.
The day I was ordained was the day before my birthday. And I celebrated my first Mass the next day on my birthday. And my first niece made her first communion in my first Mass. It was beautiful. My first 12 years as a priest was the most beautiful years of my entire life. I was 2 years as an assistant in Sacred Heart downtown in Atlanta. And what makes our lives as a priest beautiful is to be with the people. And after that, I was a pastor for 10 years in Northeast Georgia. I had 2 churches to take care, 30 miles between each one of them. I have 7 masses during the weekend. When Archbishop Gregory called me to become his vicar general, and I said to him, you took away my honeymoon as a priest. The work of the vicar general is the front line of the bishops, to have someone to go first and see what is going on and report to the Archbishop is helping him to run the diocese.
After years of ministry in Atlanta, Luis Zarama was made an auxiliary bishop of Atlanta.
It was July 7, 2009, 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday. And I got a phone call. And it was Archbishop Gregory. And I said to him, why you are calling me? Because July is the month that you take off. What is going on? And he said, Luisito, yes. And I said, yes, sir. Are the doors open in your office? He said, yes. Close the doors. And I went, I closed the doors. And I said, the doors are closed. Are you seated? I said, no. I said, sit down. And he said, Luisito, yes, sir. Silence. Luisito, I say, yes, sir, I'm here. And then they say, Luisito, I say, well, what is going on? And he said, the Holy Father has named you a bishop. And I said, what? And I say, the Holy Father has named you a bishop. And I couldn't say anything. I was speechless. And the Archbishop said to me, Luisito, please say something. And I say, wow.
On July 5th, 2017, Pope Francis appointed Zarama Bishop of the Diocese of Raleigh. He is the first Hispanic bishop of the Diocese of Raleigh and the first Colombian-born bishop to lead a Catholic diocese in the United States.
Sanctifying the people of God is helping them to find what is the love of Jesus. Government, the diocese, dealing with all the issues every day that I have in my office, working with the staff, that I have a great staff in the diocese. The easy way is to try to see and do things with love and kindness. I think for me, that is the way that I like to work. And I was walking around and looking everything at the cathedral. I sit down there in the chair. You know, it was not a ceremony, it was nothing, only me sitting there. And I was overwhelmed. One thing is the simplicity in one part of the cathedral itself, and the beauty in another side, all together. I say, what I'm doing here? This is the chair that I'm seated, it is my chair. What is the beautiful responsibility that I have